If life with your doodle feels more chaotic than calm, you'll love this. In the very popular Doodle Parent Challenge, we're going to spend 10 days together with bite-sized steps that teach your doodle how to relax and focus. It's completely online, free to join, and starts September 30th. Save your seat now at thedoodlepro.com/parent challenge. See you inside. I'm going to dive in to questions here and for our students. And I thought these were perfect book club questions that really just highlighted your expertise with what they wanted to follow up and ask after reading your book. So our first one's from Debbie, and it says, our Australian Labradoodle Finlay will bark excessively at my husband when we're getting ready to go out. He has separation anxiety, and we have never left him alone. We have a regular sitter that stays with him when we go out. He's more attached to me, but acts totally different towards my husband. We tried to calm him down. When that does not work, my husband will go into another room and shut the door. How do we fix that behavior?
Yeah, so first of all, actually, you're obviously doing a really good job of working with your dog and helping your dog to feel safe. And that's just wonderful to hear. So one of the things that can happen when a dog has separation anxiety is that they learn to associate the signs that you're going out with the fact that you're going out. So it can be that they are responding to anything that makes it look like you might go out, even if you don't do it. So that's one thing that you can train if you want to. So you can specifically try and use a counter conditioning approach to teach your dog that when you pick up your keys or put your shoes on, it's okay, and then not go out. So you can do this training, just training the preparation type things without actually going out. So that's one approach that you can take. I really like here that you are not you're not leaving the dog alone. Yes. So the dog does not have anything to be stressed about at all. And it's really interesting that it happens specifically with the husband, it seems. So another thing you could do is think about who does most of the things with the dog, like feeding them, playing with them, and so on. If your husband doesn't do so many of those things as you do, maybe he could start doing some of those things, keeping an eye on your dog, making sure that the dog is very happy with this, because without knowing any of the background, sometimes it's the case actually that people's dogs can be more afraid of men rather than women, depending on their background. So that's something to bear in mind. But maybe just have your husband a bit more involved in some of those things, if that might be something that would help as well. And the other thing is, and I'm only saying this because I know that you're keeping the dog feeling safe. I know that you're never leaving them home alone. Some people, when they have a dog that barks a lot and the dog is not distressed, they actually can teach them a quiet command. And that can be a helpful thing to do as well. And the first few times you do it, like, you have to wait a long time before you get quiet. And then you quickly reward that quiet. And the first few times are going to be really slow. But after that, it does speed up. And that can be helpful as well. The other thing to know about barking is a normal dog behavior. So we can't expect dogs not to bark at all. We can only expect them to bark a bit and then stop. And that would be okay. So that's something else to bear in mind there as well. But hopefully that's a few tips to help. Yes. And I just really love that you're making sure this dog is not left alone and always feels safe. And that's a brilliant thing that you're doing there. It's such a hard thing, I think. Yeah. So in the chat, it says we change their habits and get ready separately. And it sounds like that hasn't actually helped from what you say.
Yeah. Do you mind, Debbie, clarifying if you guys got ready separately, does that help the trigger? Because I'm also wondering, for them like departure cues, and you might think like grabbing your handbag and the keys and throwing your jacket on, that can get a dog who has worries around separation anxiety. They can get worked up because now they're expecting you to leave. And I didn't know, that was a guess of mine, Debbie. Is your husband showing more cues for departure? So Debbie says he loves the sitter and always calms down once the sitter arrives. So by getting ready separately, has that helped the trigger? Do you mind sharing, Debbie? And there's a short delay, Zazie, when we ask things.
Yes, of course, and it takes time to type anyway. But yeah, I think this is a really great question. And yes and no. Yeah, and it can happen very often that a dog responds slightly differently to one person rather than the other. And it doesn't mean that they don't love the both of you. It's just something about the situation that they are finding a bit more difficult. And I guess the other question would be, does the husband go out more often? And is there something about the two of you going together or the husband coming too that means it's going to be a longer outing? And if you're both leaving at the same time rather than having gone out separately, those are things to think about as well, because they might clue you in a little bit to what is going on from the dog's point of view.
So Debbie added another tidbit here. While I'm getting ready, he's okay with me, but my husband is relaxing. He starts to bark at him.
Yeah. And I guess another thing is, do you think the dog is upset when they're barking? That's another thing to think about. Maybe if you're not sure, find someone you can show some video to help, because that's another part of the question, is because dogs can bark because they're excited as well, or for other reasons. So it sounds like he's okay, you getting ready, but it's just when the husband starts to get ready. So you could think about specific cues to do with your husband getting ready and specifically work on training some of those. So to associate those with something positive happening and the husband not going out. So totally keeping it at a very low level. So that would be like using desensitization, basically. We bring things down to a level where the dog is completely feeling safe, but you can take those departure cues and you can train them without anybody going out. And that can be one way to work on that.
And Debbie actually had another question that flows exactly from what you're talking about. So Debbie said, my husband and I are going out of town for 4 days next week. We're going to leave our Australian Labradoodle Finley with my niece and her fiance while we're gone. Finley has separation anxiety and has never stayed at their house before. So do you think it would be best to meet somewhere for lunch and then let my niece take him to their house? Or would it be better for Finley to go to their house and then leave him? Sorry for the long explanation, but I just feel nervous about the best way to do this.
Yeah, and it's completely understandable to feel nervous about that. Personally, I think your presence can help to make a dog feel more secure. That's something we know about the relationship between dogs and their humans. So it's probably more helpful for Finley if you go to your niece's house and help him to settle in a bit, and make sure that you take things that smell of home. Take his bed with you, for example. Sometimes people like to take some items of clothing, like a fleece that you wear when you're dog walking, or something that the dog can still have something that smells of you. And that often would be better rather than just handing him over in another place. But I would expect he might take a little while to settle down once you've gone, obviously.
Yes.
And I would maybe prepare your niece for that she might have to just be patient and help him calm down once you leave.
Yes. And I feel certain that you are going to agree with me on this. Debbie is such a phenomenal dog parent here. That what she's doing is so much harder than common wisdom would say, which your book disputes with science, that Finley should just grow out of it. Finley should just get used to it. Or even that we're coddling. And what she's doing of avoiding reinforcing this fear by making it worse and worse of him being left alone when he could really be terrified of that is just masterclass.
It is. It's amazing. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
And it's doing absolutely the right thing for the dog. And it's hard to do these things. You have to change your life around. You have to hire the city. You have to have somewhere else for the dog to stay and so on. So it is really difficult to do all these things, but it's what's best for the dog. And ultimately, it's what will lead things to work out in the end. Whereas if you just say the dog has to get used to it, unfortunately, they don't get used to it. They get worse and worse. And that can just make things more and more difficult. But yeah, I think absolutely amazing to hear about this. It's really lovely to hear about such a dedicated dog parent. And I hope you're very proud.
And Debbie shared, so many of our friends don't understand the situation with Finley, and it's good to have your support. It is what you're doing, which is the right thing for your dog, is harder. This takes a lot more work and effort, and it will get you closer to him being less fearful and more comfortable in the end. But that applies to all of the experiences with fear and anxiety that you discuss in the book. By pushing them to face their fear or get over it or assume they'll grow out of it really isn't how it works.
No, it just makes things worse, and it risks making things much, much worse. And I think often people delay getting help, or they delay making changes because they hope that the dog will get used to things, and they don't. And I think that can be quite a hard lesson for people to learn. It's understandable that people would just wish the problem would go away, but it doesn't. And it is hard work to have to learn to do these things, but it makes a big difference to the dog, and so ultimately also a big difference to you.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple other questions for you that are not about separation anxiety, although you've got a great chapter on that in the book. Sora asked, Izzy's very confident and non-reactive, who assumes that all people and dogs love her and want to interact. However, she does get spooked by noises, which is one of your great examples. We've had to turn around if there's trash or recycling truck, leaf blowers, some kind of construction. We've previously taken all of our dogs on a lovely park path near our house, but there are about 45 seconds we have to walk under the infamous Washington Beltway and she stops. We don't know if we should entice her with food under the Beltway or use treat with other loud noises when we're outside. Sit and stay right there. We'll be back right after this quick break. Hey, quick break, because I've got something just for you. If life with your doodle feels more chaotic than calm, you're not alone. But you don't have to do it alone either. I created the Doodle Parent Challenge to help you go from frustrated and confused to confident and connected in just 10 days. No force, no fear. Just science-based tools that actually work for doodles. It's free. It starts September 5th, and I'll be there guiding you live. Head to thedoodlepro.com/parent challenge and grab your spot now. Let's make calm feel possible again.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about loud noises. And again, this is a situation where it's so good that you're aware of this and so good that you wanting to know what to do about it. So that desensitization and counter conditioning works really well for fear of noises. I have to add a proviso. I don't know if this applies to you, but I'm going to say it because it applies to some dogs. So in case it's helpful for a dog who is a bit older and they develop a fear of loud noises, that is one of the things that vets say is the reason you should see a vet, because sometimes pain can be implicated. So with an older dog who is developing fear of loud noises who wasn't before, it turns out that a pain like arthritis can help to cause a fear of loud noises. So that's just something to know. It doesn't sound like that's what is applying here.
No, I think Izzy is around 2. So
yeah, but just so that anyone else listening knows, that can apply to fear of loud noises. And then so the desensitization part is trying to keep the dog far enough away from the noise, or the noise being quiet enough. So you can do that with distance. You've done absolutely the right thing to turn around rather than try to go past these things that your dog finds so distressing. Sometimes you can manage to set up being like at a safe distance. You can find a park that's near a road where you can stand at quite a long distance and you can wait for traffic to come by that's a bit noisy. You're at a distance where you know the dog feels safe. And then whenever a big truck comes by, you go feed cheese or chicken or whatever it is that you're using to give the dog. So that's one way that you could work on it. I think it's helpful to know in these circumstances that ad hoc counter conditioning is still helpful. So what that means is that if you're not able to do the desensitization part and you accidentally get caught in a situation where something is too loud, like a truck goes past you still should give those treats, even if your dog is barking and lunging on their leash. You still should offer those treats and make sure they've seen that they're offered. They might be too stressed to take them sometimes, but you should still offer it. And then when they've calmed down, they can have it if they can't take it at the time. And that we would call ad hoc counter conditioning. And we do know that does help. So it's important to do that even when you haven't managed the desensitization part. And I think that's important because we can't control everything in our dog's environment.
May I ask a quick question there?
Yeah.
When we train that, our humans in this often say, but that's counterintuitive. Aren't I rewarding the barking? Aren't I rewarding that reactive behavior, the barking, lunging, or even fearful looking behavior of the hiding, etc.?
Yes, that's a great question. That's a very common question.
Yeah.
And the thing is that when you're working with a dog who is fearful and anxious, you're not trying to change their behavior, you're trying to change how they feel. So if they're barking and lunging, that's showing that you've put them or accidentally put them in a situation where they're scared, but you just need to get them away from it if you can, but you still need to feed those treats because it's the emotions that you're trying to change. So regardless of what their behavior is, they've earned those treats because they've seen or experienced the thing that they find scary, basically.
Oh, thank you. And then one of the pieces that Sora was asking is another thing that people sometimes try to do, and I get that, and I'm from the DC area before moving here out to Colorado, but that there's this amazing part. They're used to being able to walk your dogs, and your doodle would enjoy getting to the other side. So I understand the temptation of wanting to lure your dog through the thing that's fearful. What are your thoughts about that piece of the going under the bridge to get to that enticing part of the park?
Yeah, so my concern is that it's really best to keep your dog feeling safe. And actually, you can do a lot of desensitization with proximity to this underpass. So you can be near it and give lots and lots of treats just for being near it. And I would wait until your dog is more comfortable being near it before you try to get them underneath, because the risk is that they might find it terrifying, even if you're luring them with treats. And if they do find it terrifying, then you're not going to get them under it again. And you might even, if you have to get them under it to go home, that might even be quite difficult as well. So I would see it as an opportunity to do lots of desensitization, because you can be at a distance from it, and then you can gradually practice working closer and that checking always that the dog is happy. And then once they're much closer and they're happy, that would be the point at which you could get them through. So I would break it down and do quite a bit of work before that point, so that you're not throwing them in at the deep end, basically.
And it's doable. You even talk about your dog needing to get getting an oral medication, and how you had to take that slower and like really break it into smaller steps than even typical trainers would need to do.
Yes. So this was actually an assignment that I did for the Academy for Dog Trainers a long time ago. And one of the assignments is to get your dog used to a vet exam and to being pilled. And Bodger did not like being handled. When we first adopted him, if we looked at him, he would growl. And I worked out he was growling because he thought if we looked at him, we were going to touch him, and he didn't want to be touched anywhere. So obviously he got used to being petted and so on, but he did not want to be touched anywhere around his mouth. And so I did this assignment with him. And there's another assignment that everyone else finds hard. There's a special way of teaching retrieve. Everyone gets stuck on that one. I did not get stuck on it. Bodger's so clever.
He was so happy not to be touched.
It was fine. Yes. But I got to the vet exam. Most people do the entire thing in 10 minutes. I was weeks of working on this, and I was so stuck because one of the things I had to do was be able to put my hand around his muzzle, open his mouth, and pop a piece of cheese in lieu of a pill. And so I was really lucky because Jean Donaldson wrote me a special plan. There's a plan for everyone to follow. Yeah. But Bodger needed a special plan that was much, much slower and broke it down into even slower steps. And I had to start with holding my hand up and for him to come and put his mouth in. So we put his muzzle in and work on that. And it took ages and ages, but eventually we got to this point where we could do it. So if you follow a plan and you take all the right steps and you pay attention to where your dog is, it works and you get there in the end. And the reason this was so important, I didn't really think about it at the time. We didn't do any more practice of this after that. And then Bodger suddenly became very ill, and he had a cancer called hemangiosarcoma. So he had to have emergency surgery. And then after that, we opted to try chemotherapy. And so chemotherapy in dogs is not meant to be particularly harsh like in people, but it was for Bodger. He stopped eating. He completely stopped eating. and we couldn't get him to eat a thing. And we were prescribed some medications to get rid of the nausea that he was experiencing. And so I had to be able to peel him in order to get the medications down him. And if I had not done that training years before it was at that point, I don't know how we would have done it without getting bitten. So it wasn't easy to do, but it was possible to do. And it made such a difference because once he got those meds, he was able to start eating again. And so this was close to the end of his life, and to have been able to do that, it just felt like such an important thing to keep him comfortable in those last months that he had.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story about him. And it sounds obvious when you explain that, like, you could have been bit if you hadn't done that training and still were needing to try to pill him for his health. But it touches on a bigger theme in your book of dogs having choice and agency and how that relates to fear. So we probably could pull this dog through under the bridge and ignore the fear. We probably could do that.
Yeah.
And you probably could have grabbed his muzzle and really shoved something in there. Can you?
And we would have, if we'd have had to for his health, we would have done that. But luckily we didn't have to, and we could do it in a much more cooperative way, and which he did have, as you say, choice and agency. And it really helps. And giving dogs more choice and control and agency helps them to feel more safe and more confident. And it's really important for fearful dogs to have opportunities to make those choices, and that we respect those choices. And that's another thing that's changed between that, like the old-fashioned dominance approaches where you expected your dog to do everything you wanted, and now where we recognize they're sentient beings and their happiness matters. So it's important to give them choices and let them be in control when possible. It's not always possible, but if it is, then it's important to do that. And I'll just mention as well, because I said he might have bitten me, any dog can bite. I think that's an important thing to know as well. Any dog can bite if they are pushed into a situation where they are really uncomfortable. And that's why it's so important not to punish dogs for growling, because that's an important warning sign that they're unhappy. And if we punish them for growling, then they're going to move perhaps potentially to bite without those warning signs. Right. That's a really dangerous situation then.
I agree. That is something I'm personally, the soapbox I get on. That's why people say my dog bit out of nowhere. If we're punishing all of the cues and warnings that they give ahead of time, it will seem out of nowhere to us because they weren't allowed to show us anymore that they were feeling backed into a corner. And it is good to remember. And when we're talking about that agency and even like a force-free method that people have been told so many times, if your dog's scared of men in hats, give a man with a hat a biscuit and have him feed it to your dog. And that's like luring under the bridge, where if I'm scared of men in hats, but my favorite food, a slice of New York City pizza, he's handing me, I might grab it. I don't feel any better about men in hats just because I got that piece of pizza by going near him.
No. So what you would do instead is have the man in the hat at a distance where the dog feels safe, and you would be the one to feed the cookie. Or you had that example of a mouse giving you a cookie earlier. We would not expect you to go up and get a cookie from right next to a mouse. Aside from food hygiene issues, you would have the mouse at the other side of the room, and I don't know, a nice piece of chocolate or something at a safe distance for you to eat. And in the studies with humans on counter conditioning, sometimes they do use chocolate as the what they're using in the lab. Sometimes they use money instead as well, but chocolate seems to work quite well for people.
Cheaper for the lab.
Yes.
And when I used to own a dog training company, and sometimes I would have to go into someone's home and the pet parent wouldn't be there to have worked with their pup. And I would just spend time tossing food away from me. There was no requirement in order to get access to any of this food to come anywhere near me. And sometimes that walk wouldn't even happen because first we had to build our comfort and lower that fear. And that's exactly what I do when my dog meets new people. I toss away. He loves people, but I toss away, and then he gets the choice to walk up to them or not. And I've helped with those feelings.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
yeah, thank you. We have one more question. You have been so generous with your time. We're coming up right here on an hour, and we touched on this one a little bit already. So this student asked, can you work on counter conditioning or desensitization on more than one thing at a time? I know not in the same session, but could it be done at different times of the day, such as working on a sound at one time and then something she sees another? Or is it more successful to just do one thing off the list of fears at a time?
I think that's a really great question, especially because a lot of dogs who are fearful are actually afraid of lots of different things.
Yes.
So it's entirely up to you. And I think it works well to work on different things. So maybe one thing in the morning and something completely different in the afternoon. And we know that it helps if the time of the thing isn't, or the timing of this training isn't entirely predictable. So it does help to do things at different times during the day. And so the thing is that you still want to be trying to keep your dog feeling safe. So you want to keep that desensitization part as much as you can, so that whatever it is that you're exposing them to is at a level where they feel comfortable. And so long as that is happening, you can do that as much as you like. I think it actually would be probably very effective to work on different things throughout the day rather than one thing all the time. I don't know of a specific piece of research on that, but we know that the very first time that something happens is the time when most learning occurs. If you do the same thing over and over again through the day, then the amount of learning is dropping off. So we do know that from other studies. So I think if you were doing different things, like you've got the first time that day for each one, and I think that's probably going to be more effective. So in dog trainer terms, we would call this being warmed up and cold. So when you've had a few sessions already, we think of the dog as being warmed up to that stimulus and warmed up to that training situation. Whereas the first time you do it that day, they're cold, and you always typically would go back to, you make sure that you're starting at a nice, easy version of it. So I think this is also related to another question that people ask me, which is how much training can you do with a fearful dog? And they say, given that you're putting them through something, they think that the training must be difficult for the dog. But because you have that desensitization part and you have the focus on helping the dog to feel safe, you're not subjecting them to things. You're not putting them in difficult situations. All of it should be fun for the dog. So given that it's fun, you can do this throughout the day. And the other thing is that we know that sleep is helpful in consolidating memories. So for the dog to get some sleep between one training session and the next is actually really helpful too. So that kind of helps them to remember what they've learned. So I think that also would be in favor of training different things through the day if that's what you want to do.
I love it. And do you mind revisiting the part in your book where you explain the difference between that and flooding?
Yes, so flooding is when you are throwing the dog in the deep end and forcing them to face their fears, and they are not comfortable at all. You are not protecting them. You are not helping them feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's very risky because that really risks making things feel much, much worse for the dog. It risks making their fears worse. And so when we're doing the training, we don't do that, basically. We do whatever we can to help them feel safe. So we do that desensitization. We reduce the level of the sound, or we keep that distance from the truck or from the underpass or whatever to help them to feel safe. So we're protecting them from the things that they're afraid of. And that puts us in a space where we can actually do a lot of work on it if we want to, because it's all fun and happy for the dog in that point, basically. That's what we're aiming for. It should be nice. Training should always be fun for the dog.
Absolutely. Zazie, I am thrilled you were able to join us again. I highly recommend Bark, or even if your dog is not experiencing a lot of fear, anxiety, or reactivity, because there's some great guidance on prevention and how to help your pup not have those experiences when they interact with some new sight, sounds, textures, etc.
Thank you for letting me come and chat with you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and some really great questions as well. And it's just so nice to hear what a great job people are doing of caring for their dogs. So thank you very much to all of you. And thank you, Corinne, for inviting me.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.